Hello, everyone. Yesterday we discussed Basis Levar Asur as a rule, as a general explanation, but we'll go into a few details that cover so many different areas in Halacha. It should have been like this should have been probably the first Halacha for Shabbat because there's questions here about appointing somebody to do something for you, even if it's a wrong thing to do that, and vice versa. It talks about which utensils or material is more important in our eyes as opposed to, somebody else might think that it's not as valuable. I mentioned last week to somebody that in the future it says that the streets of Jerusalem will be filled with silver and gold and nobody will bend down to take it because it will be so prevalent and common that people will treat it like dirt. Actually, in Chulin, they discussed if you're allowed to use gold to cover the blood of a bird or of a wild kosher animal. And the answer of the Gemara was yes, in fact, you are allowed to use gold. And so I don't know anybody that's rich right now, but that's what Isaiah prophesied for the world to come. So if an assortment of items have been placed on a tray or table, some muktzeh and some not, the muktzeh status of the tray depends upon which items one considers to be more important. Even in the same family, like the husband and wife can disagree about which one is more important. So he's not going to get into that, but again, these such fundamental ideas. If the muktzah items are more important, then the tray becomes a basis. If the non-muktzah items are more important, the tray does not become a base and is not muktzah, therefore. And we talked in the questions and answers yesterday about why we would want to move a table, and one of the answers was that we need, more guests came and we have to set up more tables or more chairs. So that was an explanation. And so Rabbi Melamed has a little bit of different explanation. So, for example, let us say that the Shabbos candles and the challahs are on the table. If the candlesticks are made out of clay, the challahs are more important, and the table may be moved. However, if the candlesticks are silver, which makes them muktzeh mechamat chesron kis, meaning that you're afraid that they will fall and nick or lose their value, they are more important than the challahs, and then the table becomes a basis and may not be moved on Shabbat. Um, if one left a muktzah item on top of something belonging to his friend, he has not rendered it a basis. Why? As a general rule, one cannot render someone else's possessions forbidden without permission. So, Gemara Bava Metzia, of all places, talks about a Jew who has a field and um, somebody else takes the tithes. It's called tkafot kohen, if I remember correctly. Someone takes the tithes without permission, so the Baal Bait has not given the permission to do so. Therefore, the fruit are still called dmai, as far as I remember. And so there is a rule in general in Torah. The positive is shlucho shel adam k'moto, meaning I can do something on your behalf if you ask me to do it, even to marry a woman. If they say instead of hareat mekudeshet li, instead of saying behold you are betrothed to me, you say behold you are betrothed to so and so. Then that works, and they learned that actually from the law of Pesach, where it says "V'shachatu oto kol ke'adat Israel." Not the whole assembly of Israel was going to slaughter this one sheep. Obviously, we're talking about more sheep, but only one person per chabura, per group, does the slaughtering. And so the fact that the Torah says "Kol Kehalat Israel," that's what the rabbis learned, that's shlucho shel adam k'moto. On the other hand, on the negative, they said if somebody does an avera for you, or even something that's criminal, you are not fully liable. The person themselves will be judged for whatever they did. So if somebody tells somebody else to go and murder somebody, obviously he's going to suffer some kind of consequence because otherwise everybody would be doing that. Oh, I don't need to tell him to murder. I just suggest that, I would like to get rid of that person. And when I argued with my brother years and years ago about Yasser Arafat. In English, they call them chicken. In Hebrew, they call them rabbits. I guess rabbits hide in the holes more. Anyway, I said, Yasser Arafat, to the best of my knowledge, never ever killed a Jew. He says, yeah, but he started this organization for liberation, and so he is responsible for all the terrorists who did kill Jewish people. So that's why in this case, we're about back to the table. I can't make a table muktzeh for on somebody else's possession. However, if he acted at his friend's behest, or he knows that his friend wishes it to be done, like the Gemara in Bava Metzia, then he has rendered it a base. Even when the basis is much more expensive than the muktzeh item placed upon it, tables usually cost more than candlesticks, even if they are silver, it still takes on its muktzeh status since it serves as its base. However, when the muktzeh item is of no importance compared to the basis on which it is placed, the basis does not become muktzeh. Therefore, and this is another example, if one left small change on a table or bones on a plate, since the muktzeh item is negligible vis-a-vis the table or plate, they do not become a base for something that's forbidden. Similarly, if the main function of the basis is not to be a basis, for example, if the door of a closet or refrigerator is attached to drawers that contain muktzah objects, so even in the fridge, once you turn off the light, there's still it might be potatoes or onions that nobody eats raw, or something else. And especially if you don't have an animal, because we discussed a long time ago that you're allowed to feed your animals or your neighbor's animals with something that is not edible for humans on Shabbat. So if there's drawers in the fridge that contain muktzah, since the main function of the door is to open the closet or refrigerator and not to be a basis for what is in the drawers, the door does not become a basis. And one more halacha. A table that has become a basis may not be moved, but it may be used for eating or studying. As long as it is not moved, so you can set the table for food, you can set it for studying, and you don't have to worry about the muktzeh. We will remind each other not to move it or touch it. One may also expand the table or shorten it as long as they do not use their hands to move the part of the table that has the muktzeh item on it. So it's preferable to just put it on the central leaf as far as I understand. And if the table has drawers, they may be used as well, as long as the table itself is not moved. So sometimes people have the challah knife or the challah cover in these drawers that are hidden under the table. And so these are very practical ideas. And like I said, it looks like it's a very short halacha, but it contains so many ideas about the responsibility, about the intention, like we talked about yesterday, that it was kavanah, and maybe even more so last night with Rabbi Dr. Shaul to learn about kavanat chavetz. So yeah, that your intentions are good, but your actions are not. And so last night we started the book of Kuzari after the introduction from last week. So I think that's a very good explanation. And tomorrow we'll go to one more halacha of muktzeh, of what's called kalim shemelachtan leisur, and we'll stop here and open up for questions.